Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Way-T Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we are interviewing Danielle Hamilton. She's going to talk about sugar and insulin effect on every cell, organ, and system of the body. We're also going to talk about early signs of blood sugar dysregulation, long-term or chronic blood sugar issues, and how to improve blood sugar with diet and lifestyle. What doctors miss when it comes to testing blood sugar. Now, Danielle is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and restorative wellness practitioner who specializes in blood sugar regulation and digestion. She became interested in blood sugar issues when she learned that she herself was insulin resistant, and that was the root cause of her PCOS. She was able to reverse her PCOS, cystic acne, PMS, and weight loss resistance by reversing insulin resistance. Her mission is to help others uncover their blood sugar and insulin issues, as well as help them optimize digestion for low-carb diets. Danielle promotes a holistic approach to reversing insulin resistance, which goes beyond just changing macros. She's the host of the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast, great name, and the creator of the Blood Sugar Mastery Program. And of course, managing blood sugar is a big thing. It's really important to us. Of course, my business partner, Matt Gallant, his mother-in-law had major issues around that. He himself is very sensitive to blood sugar, and his wife had some major blood sugar issues, which they've addressed. We created a product called Blood Sugar Breakthrough around that. But you can't supplement your way out of a bad lifestyle. The right supplements can augment. So Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, so we connected up briefly at the Metabolic Health Summit in Santa Barbara not that long ago, and which is, for those who haven't gone, that is kind of like the who's who of, well, biohacking geeks.
Exactly.
It's researchers, therapists, scientists, all getting together and sharing the latest cutting edge research so that we can implement holistic health change en masse, concurrent or outside of the current medical options. There's a lot of people that realize that our medical system has a lot of limitations because it treats the symptoms of, but not necessarily addressing the conditions that, or the circumstances or environment or choices a person makes that accelerates or manifests those conditions to occur. And you're a great case study in the fact that you had a medical diagnosis, you went through these things, and tell us about that journey of how you went from maybe what a lot of people would deal with blood sugar is like, you're pre-diabetic, you're post-diabetic, you're this or that, you're going to have to do this and this. And a lot of people don't realize, like, diabetes is one of the leading causes of death, early death. It's far greater problem than people think. They think, oh, well, insulin solves the problem. No, insulin manages the problem. So Danielle, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Because when people see you, you look so vibrant and beautiful and attractive, and people are like, oh, come on, nothing's ever gone wrong for her.
Yeah, thank you. So my story begins in childhood. I ate a lot of cereal, a lot of high carb foods. I lived through the 80s and 90s.
What's your favorite cereal? Come on, tell us.
Golden Grams.
Those Golden Grams. Those Golden Grams. Yeah, I remember that. I was a Lucky Charms guy.
Yeah, I liked Cocoa Puffs too. I like, give me a cereal, I would eat it. I lived off cereal. Like if I went to someone's house, it's like, oh, she doesn't like what we're having for dinner, so she could just have cereal. Right. I mean, I ate processed breakfast carbohydrates 80% of my life growing up. And needless to say, my mom did well by me. She tried to give me, chicken breast and low fat milk and all the things in the 80s and 90s that you're told to give. I was treated well, but there's limited knowledge and poor science back then. And I, of course, ended up developing a lot of just immune issues, lots of colds and flus. I had strep throat, I had ear infections, and of course I had to take a ton of antibiotics. as I was getting older, I went to college and I developed really bad seasonal allergies and asthma, and I had sinus infections. I moved to Miami and the season for allergies was all year round. So I was allergic to palm trees. I was like, this feels like a cruel joke. And I moved to, and then I started getting allergy shots, and I was allergic to so many things that I had to get 5 different shots because they had to put all the different allergens in all these different vials. And I was going broke on the copays, and I was able to get a nurse to sign off that she would give it to me, give me the shots. And then I ended up teaching myself how to do it. So I would be giving myself 5 allergy shots in the stomach every other day. I was so allergic. I was on 2 inhalers, multiple allergy meds, and the chronic sinus infections. I was always tired. And this was my early 20s. I was like, what the heck is going to happen to me? I was working as a speech pathologist in a nursing facility at the time. And I was just seeing all my patients surrounding me, and they had so many diagnoses. I had to do those chart reviews. I had to write down all the diagnoses, had to write down all the medications. That was the longest part of my job. I just spent hours and hours, hyperinsulinemia, DM2, like diabetes mellitus 2, like they all had the same stuff, all had the same things going on. And I thought to myself, I'm on a ton of medications now. Imagine I'm only in my early 20s. So what's going to happen to me when I'm in my 80s? Like these people, I'm like, I am headed on this track to be right where they are. And I care about my health. I always cared about my health, but I didn't know how to address it. So I came across Rob Wolf's book, The Paleo Diet Solution. I found out about paleo, eating real foods, basically, and it flipped all the nutrition advice that I had known on its head. And I started embracing fat. I started getting rid of processed food. And like a miracle, everything cleared up. It was amazing. But what I didn't, a few years later, I had a really stressful year, and I started to notice I was getting more symptoms. So I started gaining weight. I started losing my menstrual cycle. I started to develop cystic acne. And typically I had always struggled with acne, but it was all month long now. And it was in areas like on my cheeks and on my forehead. And it was getting really bad. And I had really bad fatigue, and I just didn't know what was wrong. And here it was, the diet that just healed me. And now I'm getting sick on it. So I didn't know what to do. So I decided to paleo harder. And of course, since nothing changed.
That's great. I wanted to paleo harder. And that, I just want to interject quickly,
Sure.
because I think this is one of the things, and Matt and I have a new book coming out next year, which is going to address some of these issues, is that oftentimes when you make a diet switch from one diet to another diet, and you get a period of benefits, and I always say you're addressing the limitations of one diet for the advantages of the new diet, but then that new diet has its own set of limitations. There is no perfect diet, and diet rigidity can oftentimes block people from the next move. And they do exactly what you said. And I used to see this in the raw food movement. I was a raw foodist for a couple of years, and you really can't get
detoxing enough, right?
Yeah. You're not detox. Yeah, exactly. You can't get more restrictive. Like, it's like, no, I've got to cut out this. I remember one guy, a famous doctor in the raw food movement, came into my house and for some reason accidentally ingested some onion, and he had to lay on the ground like almost comatose for an hour and a half because the toxicity was too much for him, right? And I remember seeing it at that time, and I thought, I get if some food doesn't go with you, but the idea of health is that I've got a little bit more variance like if I have more money, I have more options. If I have more life, I have more options. If it's like the idea of health should bring you more options, not limitations. So I started to interject, but I just think that's when you said that, I decided to paleo harder. That's such a great, that's exactly it.
Yeah. And I was just talking about that on another podcast, that same thing, that when we're so identified with our diet that we have these blinders and we can't see outside of that scope. And, a lot of the recommendations for PCOS, I ended up getting diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And a lot of the information.
This is a huge issue for women right now, right?
Huge. Yeah.
We know the percentage of women that are getting diagnosed with this?
About 10% or more. That was That's probably some of the latest numbers that I know.
Wow.
But it's around that number. Probably it's probably higher because there's probably a lot of people who are undiagnosed. And, I went to my doctor. There was not good information out there at the time. And they would say, don't eat gluten, don't have dairy, don't have refined sugar. I was like, check, check, check. It looks like I'm doing everything right. So I might as well just try this harder. Right. And so obviously, since nothing changed. And I went to my doctor and I was like, I think I have PCOS. I'm eating really healthy. I'm working out. I don't know what to do. And I can't lose weight no matter what I do. And he's like, you do have PCOS. You have to lose weight. There's no cure and you have to take the pill.
Wow. That's a lot of proclamations from someone that you just met.
Oh yeah.
Imagine going on a date.
So
imagine going on a date and they say, well, you need to do this. And it's like, I'm out.
Yeah. It's like, where's the informed consent here? You have to take the pill. He forced me. I was like, oh no, the pill doesn't agree with me. He forced me to walk out of there with that script. And I'm like, what kind of treatment is this? I would never force a treatment down someone's throat. And with a white coat, all of a sudden they feel at liberty to do that or bound by their guidelines, whatever it might be. So that gave me a lot of motivation to reverse it on my own, a lot more motivation than I had even had. And so I was in the car and I was listening to a podcast and I heard someone say that PCOS is the diabetes of the ovaries. And I nearly drove my car off the road. I was like, what do you mean diabetes? All I knew about diabetes from my patients at the time were that it was something about blood sugar and it was something about amputations. That was the extent of my knowledge of blood sugar. And that was at the end of the spectrum, diabetes, when someone's already having complications, getting amputations. That's all I knew. And I was someone who had already done a ton of work on my health. I was listening to these podcasts and, the blood sugar stuff definitely came out a lot more, nowadays. And it wasn't so heavy in around the 2012, 2013 era. But I felt that if I didn't know about blood sugar and I was experiencing it, what the heck? What is blood sugar? What does it affect? And I needed to learn this. And so what I realized was that I had insulin resistance and I had manifestations of blood sugar dysregulation that I always thought was my personality. I always thought I was just a person who had a sweet tooth. I used to say every tooth was sweet. I used to always, need a little dessert at the end of the meal. I used to have to eat before I went out to eat. I didn't like being hungry, so I carried a granola bar in my purse. I just thought I didn't like being hungry, but what it really was I couldn't tolerate being hungry because my hunger was actually a blood sugar crash. It wasn't healthy hunger. And so, I also used to be a morning eater. I would say I need to get up and eat because I was shaking because my blood sugar was not in the optimal range. And then I had no ability to burn fat. So it was sort of this light bulb moment where everything got put together. And then I said, okay, let me take a look at my diet because I'm eating a healthy diet. They say paleo is a, naturally lower carb diet. So I looked at my diet and I said, okay, I start my day with a half a banana and blended in my iced coffee with coconut sugar. I have acai bowls and smoothies and plantains and sweet potato chips and kombucha. Lara bars. I'm like, I guess the sweet tooth just morphed into a paleo sweet tooth. So I was doing these paleo treats. And so you can make any diet, I guess, except, a ketogenic diet by nature, you can make these things higher carb. And so I was really leaning into the carbohydrates, even though I wasn't having vegetable oils, I wasn't doing a lot of these other things. I started to have those manifestations. People would be like, but they're healthy carbs, but they're natural, but in an amount that's not right for your body. It's not right for your body. It's too much. And insulin resistance is a state of carbohydrate intolerance. So I became intolerant to it. I think that increasing the fat on the paleo plus increasing the carbs was really why it came to a head and why I started to have a lot of these symptoms. But that's my story.
Wow. It's a awesome and great journey, and you're coming out the other side. And I think for our listeners, people have to realize that the complications from blood sugar, and I'm going to break these down. And this is something that we learned in bodybuilding a long time ago, because managing blood sugar is the key to weight loss and stabilizing your hunger, especially when we go into what I would call unhealthy levels of body fat zone. So there are two distinctions in hunger that a lot of people don't distinguish between. One is psychological and one is physiological. And knowing the difference between the two is the difference between having a great metabolism and having severe complications. And one of the things that you stated very clearly here was the difference between the two of those. That psychological hunger is like, oh, I just got to the pizza shop and boy, I can't wait to crush this 12-inch pizza. Okay, like I'm hungry, I'm starving, you know, those kind of things, right? Or it's
Or like emotional eating.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, it's like, it's psychological. Like, you know, it's 5 o'clock. I'm hungry now. It's whatever. Those are psychological stuff. But the physiological conditions that you're talking about, having the shakes or complete mood dysregulation, by the way, blood sugar dysregulation is one of the triggers for a variety of psychological conditions. I'm not here to diagnose, but I remember Dr. Hawkins, who one of the leading psychiatrists that developed orthomolecular nutrition, would put his patients on reduced blood sugar diet. They stabilize their blood sugar, and 50% of his clients would correct their behaviors or reduce their symptoms these are advanced states of psychosis and stuff like that. So blood sugar is a trigger to a whole cascade of things. When you made the switch and you recognize, hey, I've got a physiological issue here, what did you do to turn that curve around? And maybe you can talk about some of the benchmarks that you hit and what you needed to do in order to kind of manage that.
Yeah. So with the physiological hunger, I would further divide that into two branches. And I would say there's an unhealthy physiological hunger signal where your blood sugar is crashing and you have no metabolic flexibility, that you're not able to tap into stored sugar in the liver as glycogen. You're not able to tap into stored body fat. And usually that comes because insulin is elevated in the blood. And insulin is a hormone that tells the body to store sugar, and it blocks fat burning. So it blocks you from accessing those things. So you are dependent, your blood sugar is going down, and it's almost like the emergency light comes on in the car, like the gas light comes on. It's like, oh, we're low. You better start doing something. So you will have physiological symptoms like the mood things, the anxiety, the brain fog, depression, shakiness, dizziness, difficulty concentrating, heart palpitations, sweats, nausea, all sorts of symptoms like that, even feeling weak, tired, brain fog. And then there's the other type of hunger, which I sort of switched into, and that was where my body just needed fuel. And so even though I can switch into burning fat now, if my hunger feels like, oh, I could probably eat, or like, oh, I think I'm hungry. It's not like, oh my goodness, I'm going to bite someone's head off. There's no hangry. So right. that whole idea of being hangry, like, you know, those Snickers commercials where it's like you turn into a different person, that's unhealthy physiological hunger. And I think that a lot of people they don't know hunger to be anything else other than that really urgent one. You know, these are the people carrying snacks with them, or like, I need to snack, I need to have my snacks. Or you might end up like me, where I prevented my hunger from making sure that I was always kind of grazing throughout the day. So I didn't really know that I had these symptoms. I was very disconnected from it because I was sort of self-medicating. So that's sort of my, just further branching yours into two.
Yeah. It's that's very astute, because there's so many people. It's like, you know, I think back to, you know, the 70s, when growing up in the 70s and early 80s, there was no drink cups in cars, for example.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, you didn't have a drink cup. Now, like when there was a particular brand of car that I was going to purchase at one point, and not that long ago, and I was like, you know, the drink holders you can't hold 2 good sized drinks in there. And I thought back, like, there was no drink holders in the car. They had ashtrays all over the cars in the 70s. And now today it's like drink holders everywhere, drink holders in the back seat, drink holders in the front seat, because people are needing this continuous fulfillment, usually of sweetened beverages to keep, again, addressing that insulin crash. I need another hit. I need another hit. I need another hit. And so,
Yeah.
So coming out of that, like, how did you come out of that?
Yeah. So what I did was I was eating a paleo diet. And so what I basically did was replace those dense starchy carbohydrates with more fat. And I also incorporated some intermittent fasting to help bring down those insulin levels. And it was just like the paleo thing. It was like magic. It just was exactly what my body needed. I shed the extra weight. I stopped having breakouts. My cycle was normal. It took several months to get rid of the PMS, the PMDD symptoms, and some sort of painful kind of symptoms that I had with my menstrual cycles, but that all regulated after some time, because it's kind of like that cascade where every hormone issue, blood sugar is at the root of it. So we need to dial in our blood sugar in order to fix any other hormonal issue, because we think, okay, why blood sugar? What does that have to do with anything? Well, blood sugar, every time we eat it, it triggers insulin. And like I said before, insulin's that hormone. And so it affects other hormones. Insulin can raise testosterone in women, and that's where the PCOS is. It can raise estrogen levels in men. And so we can see that lowering of the testosterone as a, society. So we have these high insulin levels, and then we have these high testosterone in women, high estrogen in men, and it's leading to a lot of hormonal imbalances and a lot of big problems.
So how long did it take you to kind of go from, like, when you started integrating this new philosophy inside of your dietary style? How long, what was, for example, you did intermittent fasting, and like, what was your time on the intermittent fasting, and did that change, and what were some things, and how long did that whole process engage to kind of see the benefits?
So I made a mistake that I like to tell people, don't do what I did. I started keto with a 3-day fast. And I do not recommend that, because I was hypoglycemic and I felt like I was like dazed and drugged. Yeah, it was terrible. So never do that. Just I'll tell you now, it doesn't go well. So just don't do it. But after I started ketosis, I mean, I felt almost immediately better. It took being really strict with anything sweet tasting. So raspberries, any sort of sweeteners, fat bombs, things like that. I had such a big sweet tooth, quote in quotes, that I was so driven to eat those foods that I had to get rid of anything. So even though you can eat, berries and things in ketosis, or very small amounts of, some carby vegetables like beets or carrots, I had to get rid of those to start, because what I really wanted to do was, I call it, put my sugar dragon to sleep, because my sugar dragon was kind of ruling my behaviors and what I wanted to do. I'd walk into the grocery store and he'd start chattering and be like, oh, maybe you should get something, but not something so big, because you're going to eat the whole thing. It's just like, that mental chatter takes up so much space. And so I wanted to put him to bed and just not be controlled by these cravings anymore. And so I had to be really strict with that. That took about a month. But I started seeing benefits almost immediately, because, you lose that water weight at first, but then I was burning fat, and I saw a lot of benefits. My fasting, it would always vary. I do believe that fasting, it's important to have variety and not do the same thing over and over and over, because the body adapts so much. So I was doing a lot of 16-8, but then I would throw in like 18-hour fast, 20-hour fast. That was typically my sweet point. My body didn't really love going over 20 hours, although occasionally I would do, there was one week where I did some alternate day fasting, 24-hour fasting. It was way too much for my body. So I kind of experimented with some things and was like, oh, that's too much. Oh, that worked well. Yeah, so it took, like I said, about 5 months to see like my menstrual cycles like really improve. And then it was about 6 months until I would say I had no symptoms at all of PCOS anymore. And I have since reincorporated carbohydrates, so those paleo whole food carbohydrates, and none of my symptoms have returned. And so I feel really happy about that, because I got rid of the underlying issue, which was the intolerance to carbohydrates. So now I kind of cycle them in. I'm in and out of ketosis very easily. So some days, like today, I just had my last meal at like 3:30 p.m. and I'm going to fast the rest of the day. Like I haven't done that in a long time, but I know I'm going to be good doing that. So I love to have that flexibility, kind of keep it fresh, and then be able to have, you go on vacation, you can indulge a little, but you come back home, you kind of lock it up and get into a groove, and it becomes a sustainable lifestyle when you have those cycles and those seasons for things.
I think that's so important that so many people they'll see myself or other people who are advocates of various dietary philosophies or healthy lifestyles, and they think that we're kind of like these pristine monk living people that never do anything wrong and never have anything that's outside their reservation, so to speak, or outside the dietary parameters, or, outside the religious dogma of whatever diet that might be. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of shame and guilt that are tied into, body dysmorphia, health conditions, and the psychological implications on top of those impacts physiologically. And I can share with our listeners that virtually all of the successful people of long-term dietary strategies, regardless of what industry they're coming from or whatever their dietary philosophies, the ones that last the test of time always don't build unhealthy relationships with food. In other words, they're able to go to a birthday party, have a piece of cake. They're able to take a vacation where things aren't perfect, maybe go off their diet a little bit or whatever, or they schedule, for a lot of us, we schedule regular times each week where, that's where I can have, the off the diet program. And I think it's really important that, although oftentimes you have to be restrictive early on, or a little bit more restrictive, like you talked about, there was a window to kind of get yourself back under control, so that sine wave isn't like a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Once you get into that zone, to get your body right, then it becomes easier because you can manage it. And also, you might have noticed this. Have you noticed that a lot of foods that you couldn't live without, like now they're kind of like, I don't really like how that makes me feel, so I don't bother doing it anymore.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip, rapid cheat meal relief. Research shows that cheat meals can actually be an effective way to boost your metabolism. One key weight loss hormone, leptin, can be increased by up to 30% following a cheat meal. The challenge with the cheat meals is that all those extra calories and lower food quality can be hard to digest, which means you could be totally sidelined with a food coma after big cheat meals. The solution is to take strong digestive enzymes like Massimes, which will help rapidly digest and break down the extra food. 3 to 5 capsules before or right after your cheat meal can make a huge difference in how you feel following the cheat meal. If it's a cheat day with multiple large meals, you might want to go up to 10 capsules or higher to help you power through all that food. To save 10% on Massimes, go to massimes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and enter the code CHEAT10 at checkout.
Totally. Like pancakes. I used to love pancakes. And so we went away, and there was a place that I'm still gluten-free. I'm very sensitive to gluten, but there was a full gluten-free like bakery place, and they had pancakes. I'm like, I'm going to get pancakes. I felt like garbage. I was like, I don't want to eat this. I'm like eyeing my wife's. She had sweet potato with avocado and like a poached egg on it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want that. So I was eating off of her plate. I'm like, I don't want this garbage that I used to love it so much, but it doesn't hold the test of time, because what's shifted for me is that I want to feel good. And so that's it. So I eat in a way to make me feel good. And so if that shifts, or if that changes, or if I can get away with something because I feel like, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to pay for the consequences. I know, if I eat this ice cream, I might have a pimple in the middle of my forehead tomorrow, or have some GI stuff. I'm like, okay, to me, it's worth it. So then you dial it in so much that almost exactly what your body's going to do and how it's going to respond to certain types of food. So if you want to sort of make that choice or not. And most of the time, people like you and I are choosing no. And it feels like a choice. It doesn't feel like, oh, I have to,
Right.
Yes, once in a while, there's that victim mentality, like everyone's eating something. I'm like, I brought my own food, whatever. But for the most part, it feels really empowering to be like, no, I don't want to eat that because I know I'm going to feel tired and groggy. I'm not going to be able to perform and work and socialize, and it's going to make me cranky and affect my relationships. So we're making these choices because we're really dialed in to how foods make us feel. And I think that is so empowering to take the guesswork out of that. And continuous glucose monitors are actually another really helpful tool that really help take the guesswork out. And you start connecting like, oh my goodness, I ate this meal and my blood sugar is going up. And now I get that headache that I always get, that afternoon headache. It's not because it's the afternoon, it's because something happened to my blood sugar. So all of a sudden you get all these aha moments and you can start to fix that. And it's really, really empowering to be able to have control over how we feel a lot of the time, right? We're not going to have total control. I'm much to my dismay, but for the most part, we can pretty well predict what certain foods and things are going to make us feel like.
Excellent. So I want to switch gears a little bit kind of from your own journey, because now you're an advocate, you're a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and you also do restorative wellness practitioner. Can you talk about how your own experience allowed you to transfer into a new career in this particular area? So what happened there?
Yeah. So I was working as a speech pathologist, and I learned about nutrition. I fixed it in myself. I was working with kids with autism, and I was, reading all about how their diets can change, and many of them can reverse their autism or have huge improvements. And, I was giving illegal advice to some of the parents, being like, let's take this kiddo off. Let's just see what happens if he didn't have milk, next time he came in. And I mean, the progress that would be made in one session was progress that it would have taken 3 years of speech therapy to achieve. And I just knew I was in the wrong profession. When I first read Rob Wolf's book, I wanted to shout it from the rooftops, and now I just shout it into my microphone when I podcast. People who actually want to hear me are, now listening to me and paying to listen to me, which is wonderful. So I went to nutritional therapy school, and I love the program. It's a bio-individual approach. And I really love that about the program, because we don't all need one thing. And so we're able to work on the foundations of our health to improve every single aspect. And we see so much progress in that area. So the foundations that we learned in nutritional therapy school are a nutrient-dense whole foods diet, hydration, digestion, minerals, fatty acids, and blood sugar. So those are nutritional foundations. Of course, we need sleep and movement and connection and all those. But I thought that it was amazing, and that got me into blood sugar and digestion. And sort of based on my own story, I just started talking on Instagram and sharing my story. And people were like, oh my goodness, I feel like you're talking about me. And there's just so many people out there struggling with blood sugar issues, and they don't even know that they have it. So I like to sort of bring awareness to those early signs, the ones that we talked about earlier, and then some of the other ones that, you can have chronic migraines. And it's like, oh, really? That's related to blood sugar? Yeah, it can be. I just had a client tell me my headaches are finally gone. I mean, this has been years, decades of headaches. And she had blood sugar instability and reactive hypoglycemia, and it got better. So that's sort of how I made that shift. And now I do coaching programs where I help people identify their root causes, and we work on all those areas, and their health changes just like mine did. And it's amazing to watch.
That's extraordinary. And it's very hard to get more satisfaction when there's one thing of solving one's own health challenges, which many people in our industry, had a challenge, overcame it, and developed a company, a product, a system, or a practice around that. But when other people are able to have that experience, there's two sides to it. Number one, it really makes a deep connection with the people that you're helping and them for you, but also it seems to give validation oftentimes to the suffering that we go through ourselves early point when we don't have the answers. And I think that's a beautiful aspect. So Talk to me a little bit more about your practice, the type of people that are coming to see you, what attracts you, what are the symptoms or things that people might be dealing with if they have a blood sugar dysregulation problem and they might be a right fit for you?
Yeah, so I have been getting a ton of people who have what's called reactive hypoglycemia, which is where their blood sugar keeps crashing. So these might be people who wake up in the middle of the night and they feel like they're having a panic attack. And that's because they just had a blood sugar crash and the adrenals need to step in, pump out some cortisol and epinephrine to raise that blood sugar in an emergency. They have to eat every few hours. They might feel all those symptoms I mentioned earlier: dizziness, shakiness, feeling hangry, feeling irritable. But for a lot of them, it gets really bad. So they are not able to work. They are not able to be alone with their kids. They can't drive. Some of them can't shower. Some of them can't exercise. So I'm getting some of these people who are in the more severe range of this, but also people who have just blood sugar dysregulation, who they don't have a name for it, but maybe their blood sugar is creeping up on tests from their doctor. Maybe they are struggling with weight loss resistance. Maybe some of them have PCOS, or they just feel like they're always hungry. They're always craving something sweet. They can't get sugar out of their lives. And these are the types of people who I see. And a lot of them have a lot of those similar symptoms to me. I just had, I feel like we all have a different flavor of insulin resistance. And so it's just whatever sort of flavor, however it manifests in you, that's sort of who I help. And with the people with reactive hypoglycemia, no one is able to help them because I don't know why. I don't know why. And I hope that there are other practitioners out there who can help these people, because right now I don't know of any other than me who are sort of taking these people on and actually helping them reverse this condition. So I'd love to, start working together, collaborating with some other people. I don't know if they exist. I hope they do. But it's difficult because they usually have high insulin levels, which, like I said, block that fat burning. So they're dependent on those carbohydrates every few hours to eat. And one of the treatments to lower insulin is to have them not eat so often, to sort of fast or have time restricted eating, but they can't not eat. So it becomes difficult. And then a lot of them, if they try to go too low carb too quickly, they'll crash anyway because they have too much insulin in the system. So they need some carbs. So it's almost like they're too sick for the treatment. So we have to work with them. We have to get them, their adrenals are always an issue. And then that means because there's so much cortisol being pumped out, the adrenals are working overtime. Often they're sort of at that stage of depletion, but their minerals are always a wreck. So we need to give them lots of electrolytes, lots of salt, lots of magnesium, because that will help to support the adrenals to just sort of keep them level. A lot of these clients as well, their blood sugar is in a normal range and they're feeling as if their blood sugar is 40s or 50s, like they're crisis, like call an ambulance, my blood sugar is 90. And we know that's above the normal fasting range, or like around the normal fasting range. So people can get a major amount of gaslighting from doctors because they're like, oh, it must just be anxiety. So they get all these anxiety meds and they're like, well, I am having anxiety, but it's because my blood sugar is crashing. So it can be really rough. And so I've been sort of helping those individuals, and it's been really incredibly rewarding. Like one of my clients from the UK, she couldn't shower. She's like, do you have any tips for showering? I'm like, what? Like, what are you even talking about? She couldn't shower without her blood sugar crashing. She just was laying on the couch all day crying, couldn't walk to more than the mailbox without having a crash. She had to quit her job. And by the end of my 8-week program that she took, she was up on ladders, painting her house. She takes showers with no problem, going on 60-minute walks per day. She's not crashing. It's like a thing of the past. I mean, talk about, I have full body chills right now. It's just like you said, there is nothing more rewarding than giving someone their life back and just taking them out of this pit of hopeless despair that they're in, to think my body hates me, my body's rebelling on me. Because that's some of the things I used to say, and I wasn't even struggling half as badly as they are. And so I never wanted anyone to feel like there was no hope. And so that's in my practice. my Instagram page is very yellow and sunny and hopeful, because I want people to feel that there is hope for these problems that they're having, that you can get better no matter how bad it is. So yeah, that's my story.
Beautiful. So talk to us a little bit more about the program that you do, I know you have a program, and we have the show notes links here. DanielleHamiltonHealth.com is the website that you're talking about. So walk us through, someone says, hey, you know what, I think I might have this. What is the process of working with you, and how do they get involved in getting a program for themselves to help them?
Yeah, so I do take one-on-one clients. But I really have been moving towards more of a group format, because I just see them thrive so much. And I can also spend so much more contact time with them, because if we do it in a group form, I can see them week after week. And just the being in a group of people who are sort of struggling with something similar, it's like, oh my goodness, you are struggling with the same thing as me. There's just this feeling of being seen, of being understood, and being validated, that is so beneficial in being in a group. We also know that there's so much better accountability and so much more success and outcomes if we have this accountability of being in a group. The other thing, so my program, Blood Sugar Mastery, is an 8-week program. People have lifetime access to the video modules, where we learn a bunch of stuff. So we learn all about how to optimize nutrient density of our diets, which foods to eliminate, which foods to increase, which foods to sort of play with, right? Because there's no one size fits all. So we want to slap on a continuous glucose monitor and look at how your body is responding to these foods. There's certain ones where we might want to play with taking them out, because they're probably not doing you any favors. And then we look at how to, sift through the garbage and reading labels and all that kind of that intro stuff. But then we dive really deep into digestion. So we talk about, a lot of people think, oh, my digestion's fine because I go to the bathroom every day and I take a probiotic. It's like, well, there's a lot more steps of digestion we need to, and I know because you have great supplements that support these areas, but we need to, first of all, be in a rest and digest state when we're eating. We need to chew our food adequately. We need proper stomach acid. We need proper enzymes. We need proper bile function. We need to have our small intestine not be super inflamed, where all the cilia are shaved down because we're not digesting properly. We're eating inflammatory foods. So we need to work on that. And then finally, we get to the large intestine, and that's where the bacterial balance is. And oftentimes a dysbiosis or imbalance of the bacteria in our gut, oftentimes, if we just have a digestive dysbiosis, it can be fixed by just fixing what's up north, and then that balance tends to regulate itself on its own. If not, then I would work with someone one-on-one. We have to go deeper into the large intestine. But that's where the probiotics come in, the last step in the chain. So we need to work on those other areas of digestion. And that's huge for people with blood sugar issues, or honestly with everybody, because no one, obviously, as you know, digests optimally or adequately these days. But oftentimes people who have blood sugar issues can't absorb fat very well, and that blocks them from being able to stabilize their blood sugar. So once we get them digesting better, they get more nutrition out of every single bite of their food. And as we know, the body runs on nutrients. It doesn't run on calories or sunshine, it runs on nutrients. So we need to extract the nutrients from our food to stabilize our blood sugar, to feel happy, to be able to sleep, to balance our hormones, etc. So then we go into blood sugar regulation. We talk about an option for ketosis. It's not necessary in the program. It's very bio-individual. We talk about adrenals and stress and sleep and movement. We talk about strategies to support the liver, which is a major organ of blood sugar regulation. And then we talk about carbs. So you would think blood sugar mastery, oh no, she's going to tell me I can never have a carb again. But that's not what this program is about. It's about how to take them out for a period of time, be more strict, as you mentioned earlier, so that you can heal, and then we can cycle back in those carbohydrates when you're ready. And then we have that group coaching where we do it all together. So I can give you feedback week after week. And that's my main source of working with people now. Although I do take one-on-ones, I think that the blood sugar mastery program is just more effective. So I like doing that.
I love the name of it, Blood Sugar Mastery. I think that's a beautiful title. And of course, it's something that adds years to your life and life to your years. I think a lot of people underestimate how much blood sugar dysregulation actually limits our lives. And then the corollary diseases that come out of that, and all the big three, you know, heart disease and cancer and diabetes all have very complications. And then of course, I think the fourth leading cause of death is medical error, which is oftentimes trying to treat the first three things. And all of these are dietary related. And, you know, evolutionary wise, we weren't equipped to manage the rapid advent of super surplus, simple carbohydrate, you know, processed foods that taste great, that love them, that are addictive, that are easily available. You know, for most of history, we've survived. You know, food security was a big issue throughout most of human existence. And now we're on the other side of it, which is kind of ironic. And so it's people like you who are bridging the gap between all the beauty and modern benefits of lifestyle, of having all this kinds of great stuff, but also putting that into a system that works for the individual. Before we wrap up, is there any items that you'd like to cover specifically with people dealing with blood sugar about, hey, what do they need to do? They listen to this podcast and they're like, you know what? Sounds like me, sounds like my spouse, sounds like my kid. What suggestions would you have for them to kind of maybe broach the conversation or the subject, or that they need to take action and do something about it in their own life?
Yeah. So in terms of talking about it, I think that experimentation and just tapping into how you feel could be a good experiment. So, oh, you know, Johnny had cereal for breakfast, and look, Johnny, you were, you know, you weren't sharing, and you were being you felt cranky and you had a stomach ache and you didn't want to play with your friends, versus the next day when you had, you know, eggs for breakfast, you were happy and whatever. So even with little ones, you can start tapping into like how they felt and how their behavior was after certain foods. But the simplest way to start changing your blood sugar and reducing those blood sugar spikes, which is really what we want to avoid, is by, of course, removing the dense sources of those refined carbohydrates. So simple sugars, flour, and vegetable oils, which would be like canola, corn, cottonseed, sunflower, safflower, etc., soy, all those. We want to take those out because those directly promote insulin resistance by inflaming the receptor. But taking out those really dense sources of sugar and carbohydrates, that feels like an obvious first step. But for some people, it's really hard because they're very addictive. So we can use some simple strategies like saving your carbs for last. So if you eat your protein, fat, and vegetables first, and then eat the carbohydrates last, they have less of an effect on your blood sugar. We don't want to eat naked carbs. So a lot of times kids are eating these like fruit squeezy pouches, or people are just, you know, going and grabbing like a Red Bull. That's a naked carbohydrate because there's no protein or fat to slow down the absorption of it hitting your bloodstream. So having a hard-boiled egg and then, you know, half of an apple is better than just eating an apple as a snack, for example. Having apple cider vinegar before your meal, or blood sugar breakthrough, which is one of your supplements that has the dihydroberberine, those can reduce the blood sugar spikes at meals. And then again, this is keeping you from being in that craving zone where the blood sugar comes down. Now you're craving, now you're hungry again, and you're sort of aimed towards those carbohydrates. And going for walks or doing some sort of workout after your meals can be amazing to use up that glucose that you just put in the system. Also, you have a much better carbohydrate tolerance after you work out because you just depleted all your muscles of all that stored sugar. And so it's sort of like it just fills back in without impacting your blood sugar. So it's sort of like your get out of jail free card to eat some carbohydrates. So if you're smart about it, you can get in these carbohydrates, and that can really, really help. And then just not fearing fat. So I think so many of us, anyone who sort of grew up in the 80s and 90s, like we just have this fear of putting fat on our plate. And I always say to my clients, it's going to feel like an uncomfortable amount of fat at first, because you're gonna be like, really? Like, because we are just like spraying the pan or like a little swipe but like embrace the fats. And of course, we need to have good amounts of protein because that is the most satiating macronutrient. But once we get in those high protein and fats, it leaves less room for carbohydrates and less room for those cravings, keeps us fuller longer. We're more satiated, more stable, more energetic. And yeah, it's much better.
Danielle, where can people reach you, find out more, and get their blood sugar mastery program started now?
My Instagram handle is Danielle Hamilton Health. I hang out there a lot. My podcast is Unlock the Sugar Shackles. My website is daniellehamiltonhealth.com, and I have information on there about the next round of blood sugar mastery, which will be out. We just started a new one just this week. So the next one will be out September 2022. So yeah, thanks for asking.
Well, there you have it, folks. Blood sugar mastery. Get on it. Get your friends on it. Get your family on it. It's a raging problem throughout society today. It may be impacting you in ways that you can't imagine: your career, your relationships, and most of all, your health. And all three of those are important in order to live your best life. So I hope you enjoyed this little podcast from the Awesome Health Podcast, Way Too Lightheart, Bioptimizers, all those things. If you like it, smash the like button, share it with anyone. And of course, if you have some comments, but more importantly, make sure that you check out Danielle's site, daniellehamiltonhealth.com. Lots of information and things that you can find out about how you can get your blood sugar under control. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. I'm Way Too Lightheart. We'll see you next time. Take care.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast, it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.